Welcome to those of you at mochurch.tv online. Welcome to those of you beautiful people in person. I can't tell if you're beautiful at home, but people in person, these are some beauts, okay? So welcome to those of you guys here in person. So during the message, we've been trying to figure it out creatively, but Rihanna Montero is going to be creative journaling. We hope to have that. We've had some technical issues. Hope to have that on the screen. You can see her creatively journaling along with the sermon as we go. And I've seen how that's caught on. 2 of my 3 kids are doing that during some of the messages now, journaling, but creating pictures that go with the message, kind of graffiti art and bubble letters and different things like that, just based on their taste. I've seen different people do that and post it on social media, Sarah Sheneman, different people. I was like, man, this is really cool. We get some artistic people. So fun way to kind of listen along and actively listen. So go to Matthew chapter 9 if you got the Bible app, which you can download for free. Matthew chapter 9 is where we're going to be. When I was a freshman at Kentucky Christian University, I grew up in Toledo, but I went to school at Kentucky Christian University. I signed up for intramural flag football, and I hadn't been at school but about 2 weeks, so it was still August, and signed up for intramural flag football, and basically was on a team with largely a bunch of guys I didn't know, trying to meet new people, and I love football. So when I was a kid, my favorite position in any sport to play was wide receiver. I was a skinny, fast little white kid, and I had good hands. And so if there was anything, like baseball, I was very average. Basketball, I was the dictionary definition of average. But wide receiver, that was my home. And so I was like, oh man, I'd love to play some flag football. So we get our first game. We get on the field, and I get matched up on the other team with this guy whose name is Dave. And Dave is, flag football wasn't built for Dave. Let's just put it that way. Like, if you're a big, burly dude, like, real football is built for you. But flag football, it's all about running around and running fast, right? So this guy was this big, stocky, muscular dude. But I knew right away, like, oh, man, I could burn this guy. Like, there's no doubt. And so I concocted in my mind after he went out for a couple passes, I was just all over him like a conjoined twin. And then eventually I was like, wait a minute. If I let him get wide open, they'll throw the ball to him, and then I can close the space and I can pick the ball off. And so the very first play I thought of that, I let Dave go deep. And basically by ourselves, we were deep, and he went deep, and I left about 10 yards between us. And I saw the quarterback look and see Dave, and his eyes lit up. And he chucked the ball to the end zone where Dave was just camping out. So I turned on the burners. They call me White Lightning. And I turned on the burners, and I ran, and I jumped up in the air, and I snagged the ball and intercepted it in the end zone. And I tucked it, and I landed on the ball, kind of under my ribs. And Dave landed on my back. And Dave is thick. So I didn't know this, but when I was a senior in high school, I must have had some kind of infection because your spleen is usually this size. I didn't know this, but my spleen was the size of a grapefruit. It was swollen up from some kind of infection, like mono or something like that. And my spleen in that moment ripped in half. So I laid there. Yeah, that's what I felt like. And so I laid there in the end zone, and it was like getting the wind knocked out. Have you ever had the wind knocked out of you? You're like, oh, I need a minute to catch my breath. But it wouldn't come back. And I was like, and I just couldn't breathe. And so I basically crawled to the sideline. I did make the interception, by the way. That is very crucial to the story. I went to the sideline. I laid on the sideline, and this guy who later I would actually become good friends with, and we rapped together and traveled around rapping together. Another reason for several of you to hate me. Like dumb comedy movies. He raps too. I'm very sorry. It's just who I am. So I was laying on the ground, and this guy, they call him Shorty, he came up to me and was like, dude, you're turning colors. And I was like, I know. I'm really in a lot of pain. And he's like, we better call an ambulance for this guy. He's purple. And he just started talking through the colors. He would announce them. And as he announced them, I knew what color it was. Oh, this is not good. He's like green. And he just kept announcing colors. And we were a half hour away from the closest city in Kentucky. And so it took a half hour for the ambulance to get there. And then a half hour for me to get to the hospital. It was called King's Daughters Hospital. I affectionately named it King's Slaughter Hospital after I went there. So I laid there, and I found out, much to my chagrin, I didn't even hear it, but someone told me, you did make the catch, but there was a holding call on the defense on someone else, so you didn't get the interception. So if I weren't a Christian right now. So I end up at the hospital, and man, on the way there, once I got to the ER, I stopped breathing a couple of times, and that was really weird. So later they explained to me I was internally bleeding so much that as the internal blood got on organs, those organs would shut down, and eventually they got on my lungs. And so I was in the ER, and a bunch of the nurses and the ER nurses you want to go? You want a Diet Coke? You want Diet Coke? Yeah, I'll go get a Diet Coke. No, you asked me, let's just come with me. They all left. I was in the ER by myself, and it was like the last one went out the door, and all of a sudden all the air just rushed out of my lungs, and I couldn't inhale. And it was the weirdest thing because I was totally conscious, and I laid there in this bed I am dying, and I'm totally conscious. Now, spoiler alert, I didn't die. Okay? Some of you look really nervous, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? But I didn't die, okay? But it freaked me out, man. Once it happened when they let me call my mom. That I called her, I was like, I think I'm okay, but it hurts really bad. Okay, we're gonna drive to Kentucky. You'll be there in 5.5 hours. And I did this. Click, I hung up. She thought I died. She was like, my son just died in college. I mean, it was terrible. So that happened 3 or 4 times that I can remember. So I went to the intensive care unit. I laid there for 3 days. They hoped that my spleen would heal itself. So I laid there for 3 days just internally bleeding, and them seriously just pumping me with drugs. They would eventually double the dosage and then give it to me twice as often. And I was still in so much pain, just hurting so bad until finally, I never thought I'd be so excited to hear someone say, hey, it's time, we're going to cut you open. And I was like, oh, thank you, surgery. I wanted surgery so bad, get this thing out of me. And so I went and had a splenectomy, and when I woke up, I had 32 metal staples down my stomach, just going around my belly button a little bit, and I was in every kind of pain. I had tears streaming out of my eyes, every part of me was burning, and my spleen was gone. And so I was like, man, that was crazy. I was in the hospital for another 10 days, and eventually they released me to go back to school. And so I went back to college, and when you saw me on campus, the college, very small campus, 500 plus people. And so they were praying for me all the time in chapel, yeah, this kid, he showed up, he's been here 2 weeks, he tried to die on us, so pray for him. And so people were praying for me like crazy. I was famous before anybody knew me because I was the kid who lived, it's the boy who lived, man. So I came back, I had a lightning bolt on my forehead, but I was walking around like this because of the staples. I couldn't stand up straight. And I was really skinny now. Any tiny muscle mass I had as that skinny, fast white kid, it was all gone. And so I walked around like this real slow, and when I sat in class, I could feel my butt bones on the plastic. It wasn't that gross. Ew, your butt? But I could feel, I was so uncomfortable to sit down for a couple of minutes in class. I was like, man, I just feel, oh man, it hurts so bad. One day I'm sitting in Waters lobby, the main men's dorm. I'm sitting in the Waters, and I'm just hunched over sitting there on some, couch that costs $50. And sitting there like this. And a guy comes in who I'd already met. His name's Chris. He's a freshman also. Chris comes rolling in his wheelchair. He'd been in a wheelchair since 16 years old. He'd accidentally shot himself with a loaded gun. It put a little nick on his spinal, just a little bit of scar tissue on his spinal cord, and he became paraplegic from the upper thighs down since he was 16. So he's 18 now. He comes rolling in. He looks at me, and I'm hunched over, sitting there waiting for somebody. He goes, dude, you look awful. And I was like, thanks, man. And it's good. Not like I haven't been through enough, but I appreciate the words, And so he rolls over to me and sits next to me, and we start talking. He's like, man, how was it? I was like, it was terrible, man. He's like, so what happened? And I explained the spleen, all that kind of stuff. And he leans over to me and goes, when you were in there, did you get morphine? And I was like, dude, morphine, I had that after the surgery. I had a little button every 20 minutes I could hit, and they slowly lower the dosage the whole time. But morphine, oh my gosh, okay, this is not like recreational, but I was like, dude, morphine saved my life, I was like, oh my gosh, I was in so much pain. He goes, did you get Demerol? I was like, dude, Demerol was the drug before I had surgery. Like, they were pumping me with Demerol. He's like, Demerol's good stuff, man. Again, children, this is not recreational. Okay, so he's like, oh man, that was great. And so we just kept talking, and he was like, man, that sounds like it was rough. I was like, oh, you don't even know, man. You don't even know. And he like looks at his wheelchair, looks at me. He's like, I think I have an idea, a little bit of an idea. I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like, man, I woke up from the surgery, and I had staples in my stomach, and I had a catheter. So kids, if you're with your parents right now, you can just quietly ask them, Mommy, okay, talk about that afterward. But I had a catheter. I realized I hadn't gone to the bathroom in the last couple of days. I was like, wait a minute, I got fluids pumping in. How am I going to the bathroom? No! I had a catheter, but Chris Simpson, he looks at me and says, dude, I had a catheter when I was in the hospital. I was like, shut up, catheter club. We high five. It's like, that's crazy, catheter club. Yeah, man, we're in the catheter club together. Like, man, so we went on and on talking, and eventually he was like, can I see your scar? Now, I was embarrassed to show people because it was still like a fresh wound, but I was really embarrassed to show because it looked like Frankenstein grotesque. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I look around, I pull up my shirt, and he's like, dude, shut up, I got the exact same scar. And he pulled up his shirt, and his fully healed, same scar, went around his belly button, and just down like maybe 2 more inches. I was like, that's crazy. And man, I tell you, we became inseparable buddies based on that conversation. We became inseparable. Like, we were like a package deal the rest of college, and we hung out. You can ask my wife who went to our college, like, oh yeah, if you saw Simpson, you saw Dan. I nicknamed him soon after that, Wheels, and he went by Wheels all through college. Everybody called him Wheels in college. It's still his Facebook name is Wheels. And so like, it was because we had similar scars, we had this friendship, and from that point on, we started chasing Jesus together. Like, he was my partner in spiritual crime, man, that we could talk about anything together, and we chased Jesus, and it started with the fact that we had similar scars. Matthew chapter 9. 2 weeks ago, my buddy Brock Rohr taught about Jesus healing a woman who had an issue with bleeding for several years, 12 years, and also raising a little girl who was 12 years old from the dead. Well, this story apparently happens right after those 2 stories went on. And so we're just going to look at the first verse of it. Matthew 9:27 says, as Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, calling out, have mercy on us, son of David. Have mercy on us, son of David. Now, several years ago, my whole family took a trip to Cincinnati area to visit some friends. We stayed in a hotel. My kids were young. This is 2014 because I remember the FIFA World Cup was going on at the time. And we stayed in a hotel together. But in the middle of the night as we were all sleeping, we lost power in the whole hotel and surrounding area too. You know how it's kind of weird because you're like, why would I notice the lights going off in the middle of the night? Well, it's the AC and it's all those little nuances of noises. When it suddenly is dead quiet and pitch black, you're like, something's wrong. And you wake up, you're like, what's going on? And we had lost power. Well, my daughter, Aslan, young Aslan, who was 9 years old at the time, she woke up and she didn't know we had lost power and it was pitch black. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, from her bed, we hear, I'm blind! I'm blind! She started screaming her head off. It was one of the saddest things and one of the funniest freaking things that I've ever experienced as a parent, because it's scary to think I've lost my sight and blind. Well, it was even scarier in Jesus' time, okay? In the first century, eye diseases were rampant. Of course, there were some people born blind. Other people just got the wrong germs in their eyes, and they would get infections, and they would go blind. And so there was if you were blind in the first century, no chance for a future. You couldn't get a job. There were no romantic interests. You were essentially destined to be a beggar along the side of the road. That is scary. And so this is what's going on here. But I want you to notice in this story, the first thing I want you to notice is there are 2 blind men. Man, that's really interesting. There are 2 blind men. I wonder if they're together because they had common scars. Like, I wonder if it's because, man, we share stories of suffering. Like, we're in the same boat together. We have a lot in common. Like, yeah, oh yeah, we're in the same club in so many different kinds of ways. So they decided to hang out. Like, well, let's do life together. We both have no future as far as what we dreamed for ourselves. So let's hang out together. And the famous verse in Scripture, Ecclesiastes 4, says, two are better than one. Pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. A famous verse about relationships and community, or as the great theologians Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock said, it takes two to make a thing go right. It takes two to make it out of sight. Again, I'm just building up hatred toward myself right now. Okay, so anyways, the two blind men, they find each other on Bumble BFF, and they're like, hey, we got a whole bunch like in common. Like, let's hang out together. We have common scars. We have common scars. And they decide, I picture literally, to link arms together. Like, let's do this together, and they hang out. So I picture them literally linking arms together and being together, and they team up to support each other. You know, this is kind of like an elementary school. You go in, say kindergarten, first grade, we're going to the gymnasium, or we're going to the restroom. Everybody line up, buddy system. So not just lined up, but you're holding hands with a buddy. So no one gets lost. So no one gets away from the pack and like, oh, somebody wandered. Hold someone's hand. It's the buddy system. And so, that's how you stay together. Last summer, I stood in the back of this auditorium, and I saw a guy who had just been through something awful. And I was like, hey, come here for a second. I said, man, I got to tell you, this is a club, the club that you're in right now. Nobody wants to be in the club that you're in. But this is my buddy, and he also this summer has lost his wife. I think you guys need to know each other. Like, this is a club that nobody wants to be in, but Glenn, meet Tom. Tom, meet Glenn. Like, and I just kind of walked away and let them start talking. And I know a whole bunch of you know some of each other's stories if you've been around for a while. There's a whole lot of people here. Anybody here who's in a club nobody wants to be in? Anybody? Like, I know I have been, like, oh man, this thing I'm going through or I've been through in my childhood, I'm in the club that nobody wants to be in. There's so many of those clubs. Like, these two are in the blind guy club. I'm in the catheter club among many other fatherless club. There's so many clubs that I and many of you have been a part of. And so there's a lot of people here. I mean, nobody wants to be in the widow or widower's club. It's crushing. It's heartbreaking. But I was like, maybe these two, maybe they'll link arms. I don't know. Maybe there's some support that they can find within each other. I don't know. We'll see. And so, I mean, maybe you're in the divorced club. Maybe you're in the addiction club. And it might be substances or something online like porn or gambling. Maybe you're in the we're fighting through trust issues in our marriage together club. Maybe you're in the I'm single and lonely, but I'm trying to honor God with my sex life club. And there's not a lot of people left in that club anymore. Maybe I'm in the cancer club or the miscarriage club or the rape victim club. These are clubs no one wants to be a part of. And that's all the more reason it's so important to be like, man, I've been there. Maybe we can link arms. Maybe we can walk together. Maybe we can support each other through this. And so if you're in any of those clubs, I just want to say you're in good company because God, in his foreknowledge, created this thing that he calls his church. And he's like, man, everyone is broken, just broken in different ways. And you can find some of these people who are in clubs that no one wants to be in, and you can link arms with them, but you need to find someone to link arms with to get through that. In his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis, a Christian writer, back in the day, he essentially said friendships start when one person says to another, you too? And that could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? It could be, you went through that in your childhood too? You too? What? You read those books too? I love those books. Like, you too? Man, are you kidding me? Oh man, you have the same scar as me, you too? Like, that's how friendships start, C.S. Lewis said. You don't have to have everything in common. In fact, great depth comes from knowing someone that you have some scars in common, but maybe you don't agree politically or how to raise parents. You get depth from that because you'll listen to your friend about some things that you would never listen to anybody else about. You just call them a demon because they're on the other side of the political aisle or whatever, right? Right? But if it's your good friend, you're like, okay, maybe I'll hear it out. Maybe everybody on the other side of the aisle isn't a demon because my good friend who I share scars with. And man, friendships deepen you. They deepen you and they expand your horizons. Years ago, there was a study done with researchers would take a monkey, and this is a famous study. I've thought about it for years. They took a monkey and they put him in a cage and they'd put him in a room, and they wanted to check his cortisol levels, like his stress hormone levels. And so they put him in a room with all these flashing lights and loud music and cymbals, like really crazy stuff like that. It's like the saddest thing ever. And so this monkey goes in this cage in this room, and when it starts happening, his eyes just get wide and he's looking around or whatever. He's like freaking out from all this stuff that's going on. But then when they take him out of the room, they immediately take blood from his brain. So it gets worse. They take blood from his brain and they check his cortisol levels and they see where they're at. You know, where's his stress at based on that? And then they do one more thing. They're going to put him back in the room, but they add one thing this time. What do you think it is? A buddy. They put a buddy in the cage with him, and they stick him in the same room. Lights, noises, cymbals, strobe lights, or whatever. And when they take him out, they check the original monkey's cortisol level again, and it is dropped by half. And the only thing that's different is he had a buddy that experienced with him. Like, that's crazy. I mean, wouldn't you love to have your stress right now, whatever's stressing you out, drop by half? Wouldn't you love to have the amount of depression you're dealing with potentially just drop by half? You know, whatever hard time you're going through, be like, I'm going to bring that down by half. Like, that's kind of amazing. In fact, researchers say, like, here's what you learn from that, is that this idea of what happened to the monkey and what it went through or whatever, it's not just like a biochemical thing. It's also a psychological thing. And so your brain, you know, it needs certain things, like it needs oxygen and glucose. But what this study shows is your brain also runs on positive, supporting relationships. Your brain runs on that. And like having a buddy was a big difference for that monkey. And so, you know, wherever you go, whenever you're going through tough times, like one thing that we've learned from science is whatever you're going through, tough times or whatever, relationships reduce stress. Like they make it easier, more livable to walk through that storm or that season. And, you know, just it actually changes your brain chemistry. That's how God made you. He made you for relationships. And so it mitigates the effects of problems and crises and hard times. Our brains need positive relationships to grow and to function well. So here's my question. Who's your buddy? And that sounds like a dad asking his little kid, who's your buddy? Who's your buddy? But who's your buddy? Like, who's your spiritual partner in crime? Who is your accountability partner? Notice I said spiritual partner in crime. I'm not talking about your drinking buddy. I'm not talking about someone you go to gossip when problems are at work and they encourage you to hate your boss even more, let the bitterness grow. Who's your spiritual partner in crime? Who's your spotter? Who's your accountability partner? Who's your buddy? Because, man, God made you for those kind of spiritual relationships. And so these two blind men had similar scars, but they decided to link arms, and they stuck together like a couple of conjoined twins saying, we're going to be inseparable. We're going to do life together. Now, here's what happens the rest of the story. Matthew 9:27, repeating this verse, as Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, have mercy on us, Son of David. When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, do you believe that I'm able to do this? First off, you're like, wait a minute, really? Had they not already demonstrated that they believed that you can do something for them? But he asked that question. I think there's great purpose behind him asking that question. And they say, yes, Lord, they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, according to your faith, let it be done to you. And their sight was restored. By the way, a hallmark of Jesus' earthly ministry was healing the blind. He cured lepers, you know, he cured people who couldn't walk. But blindness, it's like a hallmark of what Jesus did to be good news when he was on earth. And so I just want you to notice the faith of these two blind men. Like, one, they both believed that Jesus could heal them. That's what they mean by have mercy on us. Have mercy on us. And Jesus knows that because when he sees them, he's like, hey, do you really believe that I can do this for you? So Jesus knows what they're there for. So they're chasing him to be healed. Jesus has solutions to their problems. The second thing is they both agreed that they agree who Jesus is. He's the Son of David, which means he's the Messiah, which means he's the Christ, which means he's the anointed one sent by God that's been prophesied about for centuries. And they agree that's who Jesus is. Son of David, have mercy on us. They agree who Jesus is, and they've linked arms. And the third thing is they chased Jesus together. They went after Jesus together. They weren't just common scars, because we can find people with common scars and just gripe about it and grow in bitterness, wallow in our sadness, wallow in our anger and bitterness. These two are like, okay, we got these common scars, let's chase Jesus together. He has solutions. He has answers. He has healing for us. My college professor, Dr. Robert Ford, he's kind of like, he was a short, little, happy, energetic, exactly what you picture like an old professor being. He's a great guy. But I remember him talking about this little story in college and saying, expound on that story in your mind. How did this have to happen? What did it look like? And what he meant was, how do these two blind men navigate this crowd? They're in a crowd of people. Jesus always had a crowd of people around him when he was in a town. So how did they navigate that crowd? Maybe these two blind men were on a familiar road. Maybe they weren't. And so just picture, like, maybe they followed along, and maybe if their arms were linked, maybe they were holding hands, maybe they were constantly chatting to each other to know where they were at. But as they walked, maybe they groped through the crowd trying to get to Jesus, and they listened to the footsteps as people in the crowd followed Jesus. Maybe they listened to Jesus' voice. Like, can you picture that? Like the effort that went into that? That's what's going on in the story. And then this is what's crazy is, did you catch what happened in verse 28? When Jesus had gone indoors. Wait, Jesus, are you running from the two blind men? Like, you know that they're there. What is going on? Like, he went into a house, and the two blind men find their way through a crowd into this house. Like, they're putting remarkable effort into chasing Jesus and going after and pursuing. And what I think has happened, I think Jesus is testing their faith of like, hey, do you just see me as a genie? It's going to answer, give you wishes, grant your wishes. Do you see me as a Santa Claus? Do you see me as a walking gumball machine, like a miracle? Like, do you really have faith to come after me? And he goes into this house, and they find their faith is pushed to its limits, and they get in there to be with Jesus. So these two blind men, they have some more scars, and they realize that, and they decide to link arms together, but together they chase Jesus. And so my buddy Jason Liu, who's emceeing today, and he's an elder here at Momentum, and he's also a good friend, but he's a nurse practitioner. And I remember a few years ago him telling me about buddy taping in the health industry. He's like, buddy taping. And now that he's told me about it, I see it all the time. And he's like, so somebody breaks a toe or a finger, what you do is, you kind of splint that toe, but you tape it to a healthy toe next to it. That way it heals correctly and it heals straight. And he said several years ago to me, that's a good visual of getting a buddy for a time when you're really broken. And man, that is so true. Like, I think these two blind men are buddy taped together. So you know how it is when one of them's struggling and the other one's like, I'm actually having a good day. Let me pep talk you. And then that guy's struggling. The other guy's like, I'm in a good day. Let me pep talk you, man. We're going to chase Jesus together is, ultimately the point here. But when you're broken and when you're feeling sorry for yourself, or when you're allowing yourself to become a victim, or when you're getting lazy and complacent, it really helps to be buddy taped to someone who is chasing Jesus. And I'm like, get up, come on, man, let's keep going. Especially if that person is authentic and sincere and faith-filled, and they believe in the authority of Scripture, like, man, God's word, it has stuff to say about my life, and I'm not going to like all of it, but if it's God, the creator of the universe, then I need to submit to it. Man, to be buddy taped to someone like that is so good. Like, so who inspires you to chase after Jesus? And don't say your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your spouse if that isn't true. Think of someone who really inspires you to chase after Jesus. Who is that? Like, we've had a lot of new people show up at Momentum since 2020. You know, like, we were online only, and then we opened up almost exactly 2 years ago right now. And we had a lot of new people between then and now who just keep showing up, and they're brand new. But, you know, one of the things you'll eventually see at Momentum is the people who are spiritually thriving, not just surviving, but thriving. They're in a Mo group, a small group community, meeting in a living room or at the church building or wherever, or they found a team to serve on. They're finding some way to create community or to be a part of community where they're linking arms with people. And they're getting buddy taped to some people who will encourage them, push them, pray for them, check in on them, kick them in the butt every once in a while, you know, tell them maybe they have a blind spot, whatever it is. That's how true friendship and community looks like. And so for you, maybe you are like, man, I've got a plan and I've got a partner, but I don't have the pursuit. Like, yeah, I've got friends, but they aren't the kind of friends that are encouraging me forward spiritually. I just got friends. So maybe, you know, maybe you got the pain. Maybe you've got some buddies, a partner, but you need the pursuit to say, I'm going to chase after Jesus, and I got to get around some people who are going to help me chase after Jesus. So when I fall, I give them a hunting license in my life to say, man, get me. When I fall, you know, help me out, pull me up, encourage me, or however you're motivated, whether it's a kick in the butt or an encouraging word, like, do that for me. That's what you need. Like, you know, if you're not, if you're just wallowing in your brokenness and your bitterness and your pain and your hurt, in the classic words of Dr. Phil, you know, how's that working out for you? Eventually you realize, I need the buddy system, man. It takes two. I need somebody or a community of people to cheer me along. And the two blind men believed Jesus had the power to solve their problem. So what's your next step? Very simple. What's your next step? Spiritually speaking, everyone, me, every leader at Momentum has a spiritual next step that I think God is like, okay, keep moving forward. Like, what's the next step for you to grow? Maybe for you, it's like, I'm going to make Sunday morning a priority. I need a spiritual community. I can't just be some lone ranger, some person on an island, and actually move forward spiritually. I can say what everybody says. Oh, I'm a spiritual person. I got a relationship with God. It's just between me and God. Well, it's funny because God says it isn't. He gave you people to move forward with you and to encourage you forward so that you wouldn't just become a random cat lady or a random dude who's just all by himself with nobody. Yeah, I just been the Marines, just by myself. It's what I do, you know, whatever. No, you were created for people, relationships, a relationship with God and with others. So maybe it's making Sunday morning a priority. Maybe it's making a plan. I'm going to read the New Testament between now and the end of the year. I'm going to trust and honor God with my time and finances the way that Justin talked about earlier. Maybe I'm going to commit myself to finding a Mo group when they start up again in September. You got a little bit of time to think about it, get ready to get jacked and be like, I'm doing this. I'm going to a Mo group. I'm doing this. Or maybe it's apprenticing to lead a Mo group. Some of you are in that place. Like, I got lazy during the pandemic. It's time for me to start leading again and making a difference in people's lives. Last thing, just one more point. At the end of this story, it says, Jesus warned the two blind men sternly, see that no one knows about this. But then they went out and spread the news about him all over the region. Now, this is interesting because it's something scholars call the messianic secret, and that is during Jesus' earthly ministry, you see in the gospel accounts, the eyewitness accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, often Jesus will heal a leper and say, okay, shh, don't tell anybody about that. He'll heal a blind person. Shh, just keep that, shh, just don't tell anybody about that. This is between me and you. He's like, the guy runs off, I can see! You know, he's like going crazy, and the lepers are re-entering community, all this kind of stuff. It's the messianic secret, and what I think it means, what most scholars think it means, is that Jesus didn't want to be known as just some miracle worker. Like, hey, can you, man, hey, Jesus, yeah, you're that dude. Can you get the migraine? I got a hammer toe. I got, you know, can you figure, man, I got this thing in my back. That isn't what Jesus wanted to be known for, and so he didn't just want people going around talking about his miracles all the time, and so he's like, shh. But at the end of his earthly ministry, after he died on the cross for us and rose from the grave, he said to his disciples, go and make disciples of all nations. Otherwise, he told them, Go tell the world about me. Now, there's such great irony at the end of the story, and here's why. The great irony is that Jesus commanded the two blind men to keep him a secret, and they told people about him anyway. And today, he's commanded us to tell people about him, and we keep him a secret. Isn't that a great irony? Like Jesus has now said, go tell the world I have healing. There's forgiveness in me. The broken are stitched up within me. Go tell the world. So go tell your friends about the Back to School Fest and let them see people serve their family in the name of Jesus. Go, tell people that have little kids, man, you ought to come check out Mo Kids for your kids at Momentum. Or if you're a student, middle school or high school, invite them to Amplify or student ministry. Or invite your friend to read through the Gospel of Matthew, this gospel, on the Bible app with you remotely. But tell the world, because the power of Jesus is not supposed to be a secret. Jesus lifted that and said, go tell the nations. Let's pray.